They are not making this up.
They threw down a ladder from that spaceship, and then two small people started climbing down.
Rumor has it there is a secret base hidden underneath the 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧 here. The mountain overlooks Dulce.
In your opinion, and based on research, are the extraterrestrials, are the Greys providing our military any kind of information and knowledge?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we've all driven down highways, but what about the UFO highway? Our guest on Beyond Belief is 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘, who heads up an organization called Umbra Research, which is telling us about emerging technologies with UFOs. Anthony, I'm glad you do what you do.
Thank you, George.
Good to have you on the program.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
You are a technologist by trade.
Right.
Has this affected your career, or have you devoted it now full-time to ufology?
You know, I have over 20 years working in Silicon Valley. I have a degree in computer information systems with an emphasis in software development, software engineering. And I have, I'm one of those people that was on the fast track at like major semiconductor companies. But I've worked in some pretty important capacities, business intelligence, data analysis, software engineering. Has it affected my career? You'd be surprised. There are a lot of nerds and a lot of geeks like myself who are not afraid of the ufological discussion.
Right.
So not really. When you get into executive and management levels, they tend to not want to be distracted with people's personal interests.
What got you to write the UFO Highway? And tell us about that.
Well, my personal experience is number one. Initially, the book was called UFO Highway because I was focused on Area 51, the extraterrestrial, highway.
Sure.
So I didn't want to exactly call it that, but I wanted to have a play on words, maybe metaphorical. And from 2007 to 2009, my focus was Area 51. However, in 2010 is when I met this individual who claims to have been working at a facility underground in northern New Mexico alongside gray aliens. Pretty controversial.
Sure.
There were already two stories out in the public that were very well known. You had Ann Richards with Captain Richards, and then you had Ann West, Shirley Hinkle with John Lear, and this whole Tom Costello story. I was afraid to get into that. I had already been...
What do you mean afraid? Afraid of what?
Because there's this reptilian aspect to it, there's this gray alien aspect to it, there's military industrial complex involvement. It's a very involved story that has emerged out of northern New Mexico.
Sure.
And it has come under lots of scrutiny. And me trying to find answers with regards to reverse engineered alien technology, do aliens exist? What did I experience as a child? I did not know if delving into the Dulce lore was going to distract me, number one, and number two, cause more pain. You're almost like constantly suffering, under the eye of the audience that is trying to, as they're also trying to seek answers. They're also trying to find the individuals who can provide answers.
Sure.
So
constantly.
Dulce is very controversial. So I was worried about delving into that.
There have been cases that have been remarkable, UFO cases that are frightening. In your experience, are we in any danger with these visitations?
When people ask me about scenarios that paint a dangerous picture, I focus in on actions by major governments, major players around the globe, and is there some sort of an alien component? For instance, look at China. China just built the FAST, which is the 500-meter aperture for a spherical telescope. It's this massive, essentially take Arecibo in Puerto Rico and just
times 10,
ginormosize it. Right. Now, why didn't China just rent time with Arecibo like everybody else around the globe does? All these other scientific, endeavors that take place, using the radio telescope. Well, from 2014 to 2016, they constructed this monstrosity, and nobody other than Chinese scientists get to use this facility. And when you think about it, it's an antenna. So I don't believe that they are using it solely for listening from radio, waves from outer space.
Maybe they're sending.
I believe they're sending to a specific set of coordinates, and they are communicating. Also,
wow.
Way back in 2010, I went on the late Jerry Pippen's radio show, he's since passed away, and Mel Fabregas' radio show, Veritas. And I spoke I was very vocal, very public about information that I had received from one of my government sources who told me that emanating from beneath the Chengdu area of China, the Chengdu district, was a massive underground complex that extended beyond 3,500 miles out in all directions.
Like a city, right?
Right, but specifically down to the coastline of the South China Sea. Now, not just a year later, from Georgetown University's Professor Philip A. Carver and his Asian Arms Control study, this is where he has a bunch of students helping conduct a study. They released the information that prompted a congressional hearing. Essentially, they discovered that there were 3,000 miles of underground facilities.
What are they doing with it?
Right. So the Georgetown study said that these underground tunnels, essentially, were solely for the purpose of storing weapons. Now, that's not true, and it's not accurate. The truth is that, now this is from my government informant.
All right.
He says that these are state-of-the-art underground facilities, living facilities, working quarters, and they do have storage facilities as well, but they are electronically grounded and magnetically shielded.
Are they like bunkers to hide?
Right. Imagine, not just for Chinese residents, but for anybody who can afford it. Remember the movie 2012?
Oh, yeah.
With the arcs?
Yeah.
Right. So this paints somewhat of a similar scenario where if there is some sort of impending doom, some doomsday
Asteroid
scenario,
coming this way, some calamity, right?
Yet you can buy your way in. That's what I am being told. Now, interestingly enough, Philip A. Carver was also a Pentagon specialist. So there's a tie with the Pentagon, the military, and then again, this study prompted a congressional hearing.
UFO Highway tied into Area 51. Bob Lazar, of course, tied into Area 51. He worked there, claims that he witnessed incredible data of an alien autopsy.
This was totally unrelated to anything I was doing, but from that photograph, it looked like what you see in UFO lore as the typical gray. So how tall it was from what I could see, I couldn't tell because I only saw a portion of the photograph. But if everything else you see is correct, I would imagine it was 3.5 or 4 feet tall. But there again, all I had to see was a photograph, and I didn't have much to go on. Allegedly, this interaction has occurred since, man was a simian creature, and, there were genetic alterations made.
Anthony, what do you think of Bob Lazar? And
He's absolutely right.
What he says?
He's absolutely right. This is a man whose entire academic past has been wiped clean. Strangely enough, though, Bob Lazar has managed to continue, working in a scientific capacity for the government. So it's kind of strange when you think about that whole scenario. That first they tried to discredit him, but later
they need him more than
they need him more.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the things that he puts forth through his company, it's pretty cutting edge stuff. It's and some people would say it's very advanced.
In your opinion, and based on research, are the extraterrestrials, are the Greys providing our military any kind of information and knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have the Hyperion example, which proved that the micronuclear technology or reactor technology that emerged out of Los Alamos, New Mexico, came directly from Greys.
What are some of these other technologies that they may have given us?
Computing technologies. Look at, Phil Corso, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the technology that was leaked out into the private sector over a course of 30 to 40 years, we saw an advancement in
silicon chips,
integrated circuitry that was not supposed to happen that fast. Moore's law states that every 18 months we see a doubling in processing speeds. So as a technologist, looking at it, I can see that there's some sort of a pattern that emerges. Computing, processing technologies seem to leap forwards, but other areas we seem to be stagnated to some extent.
Anthony, history has shown us that if you give, you receive. What are the ETs getting back from
They're
us?
getting natural resources and cooperation. They're managing to sustain their existence and in a much more easier means being facilitated by us. But with regards to the gray aliens that Bob was describing, he's absolutely right. The gentleman that I interviewed claims that they discovered metallic sheets that had this Akkadian type cuneiform, which is a writing system that dates all the way back.
That's what the Sumerians did,
right, to the ancient Sumerians. So we're talking about the cradle of civilization between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, modern day Iraq. Very well known, and that ties into the Anunnaki. So based on some of the cylinder seals and some of the writings that are still in academia today in some museums like in Cincinnati and in Germany, we know about the Ajiji. And who are the Ajiji? Well, the Ajiji are a created being by the Anunnaki that are essentially seen as a demigod by the human race. The Ajiji, being the Greys, are prolific throughout our history.
The history of ufology, because we hear stories of Greys since Roswell, since who knows when.
Up to this very day. Last year, I spoke in Dulce, New Mexico as a keynote speaker alongside 𝗩𝗓𝗦𝗬𝗧𝗘, and it was the first time that the Hickory Apache had come forth with this, almost with like this permission from the tribe to be truthful and honest and share. It was
And they
a year
described
of sharing.
alien Greys as well.
Oh my goodness, George, for the first time ever. Now keep in mind, I've been going to Dulce, New Mexico since 2011. And this is the first time where in public, they have talked about things like engagement through, where they've been paralyzed, like forms of sleep paralysis surrounded by Greys, familial connections, people getting certain types of cancers, being cured from these cancers.
By the Greys.
By the Greys. Not to mention traffic. They hear traffic beneath their homes, like traffic, like cars and trucks.
Like underneath?
Underneath their homes, late at, in early morning hours. This is in the township of Dulce, New Mexico. We have reports of black helicopters all over the place shortly after UFO sightings. This is very commonplace. I have one family in particular who I'm good friends with. She is an 11-year police officer, a veteran police officer of the Hickory Apache Police Department, and her grandfather is the president of the tribal council. She has sent me photographs of UFOs and of black helicopters.
Well, this is an area, Anthony, that is loaded with UFO cases.
Dulce is a quiet, unassuming town nestled in northern New Mexico. Many of its residents are members of the Hickory Apache tribe. They swear.
I tell stories, but my nose isn't growing.
They are not making this up.
They threw down a ladder from that spaceship, and then two small people started climbing down.
Jerry Julian says she had her first extraterrestrial encounter right here on her Dulce ranch about 40 years ago.
It was huge. I just saw the bottom of it. It was like flat like this.
Many of her neighbors claim similar strange sightings.
Fat in the middle and kind of like rounded on the sides. You're speechless, You just don't know what to think, It's just like, it's like nothing you've ever encountered before.
Why are stories of the extraordinary ordinary here?
I do not know. I do not know. Probably kind of that big mountain we have right there,
Rumor has it there is a secret base hidden underneath the 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗘 here. The mountain overlooks Dulce. Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments.
Wow, that backs up everything you've been saying, Anthony.
Right. One of the most compelling stories to have ever come out of Dulce happened in 2012. I went to Taos, New Mexico to speak for Janet Saylor's ASPE organization. Met up with Edmund Gomez, who's part of the ranching family, who experienced many cattle mutilations, ultimately forcing his family out of the cattle business. They couldn't sustain the cost involved with losing so many cattle. That year, I met with a former police officer of the Hickory Apache Police Department who is now a high-ranking official of a neighboring community. I can't give his information publicly, but I can tell you this.
Oh, give us a little bit.
Well, Rick Prestel from the Sacramento MUFON organization was there to witness this event, as was Janet Saylor. His 2 adult sons, this individual, I will say this, he's a chief of police in a neighboring community, but I cannot say which one. And he is considering running for office. He gave us 19 separate accounts of what he called escaped experiments from the Dulce area, what he called hybrids, cryptids. And he gave
And he's dead serious.
Dead serious. And you're not going to lie in front of your adult children. You're not going to make up this type of a story. He was very forthcoming. And you could just tell the genuineness coming from this man. He was sincere. And it was like he was finally getting this monkey off his back.
Yeah.
He could share
He
with
was
someone.
relieved of this, huh?
It would not let us keep the sketches. However, I'm a very good artist, so as soon as I got back to my hotel room,
You sketched
I redid all
And are they grays?
Not gray. Some of them were gray hybrids, gray animal hybrids, very strange, winged creatures. But the story that he told, which for me was the clincher, was this. I had received documentation from Mel Fabregas from an estate sale of Paul Bennewitz. And in these documents were handwritten notes from Paul Bennewitz. I'm going to get to something in a moment. But the story that this chief of police gave to me was that while he was a police officer in Dulce, New Mexico, him and his partner one evening were parked beneath the huge face of the mesa that has the, it would be the southwestern facing columnar basalt cliff.
Okay.
The two of them saw this light emerge from the side of the columnar basalt, and then a craft emerged. He described it as a teardrop-shaped craft, and it had this lavenderish colored fluorescent lighting emanating from it. They flashed their floodlight onto this craft. It wasn't that far from them. And then it started toying with them. And he said the two of them were terrified.
Flashing back, almost
Right.
like Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Right.
that kind
And
of
he
thing.
said they were terrified at that time. And as the craft approached, he swore he saw a gray being piloting the craft. Now, this is where the story gets strange. Some 30 years earlier, this guy didn't know who Paul Bennewitz is, by the way.
Right.
Some 30 years earlier, in the handwritten notes, which I do not believe had been made public at that time, and I still don't think they have been, unless people had heard it from me, Paul Bennewitz described seeing a teardrop-shaped UFO with a fluorescent lighting system.
Same thing.
Same thing. These guys don't, he never knew who Paul Bennewitz was. Paul Bennewitz died in 2003, I think it was. So there's your correlation.
What is it about this area that creates these incredible sightings?
Well, let's assume for a moment that there is a massive underground facility beneath both Mount Archuleta and the Archuleta Mesa.
All right.
And there are gray aliens there. If they are indeed giving us technology, sharing technology with us, and helping us to reverse engineer technology that we have from crash retrievals, because them being far more sophisticated technologically than we are, that would explain the level of UFO sightings that we're seeing. This could be some sort of a testing ground.
And where are they
proving
coming
ground.
from exactly? There's got to be an opening somewhere.
You know, I have been told that off the eastern slope there is a 2-story underground security auxiliary, and it has some sort of hydraulic system that elevates craft from beneath within the facility, and that's where it's happening. We have credible sightings, multiple credible sightings over decades from the area. got to remember that it was back in the 1950s, not far from Dulce, there was an armada of UFOs seen over Farmington, flying towards Dulce.
Right.
And that made the newspapers
was a
and
huge
scared the living
story.
daylights out of entire communities.
What we don't know, Anthony, is whether these are extraterrestrial or from this planet, a higher civilization. We don't know that yet, do we?
You know, there's lots of postulation, you know, people, you know, if you remember the video with Bob Lazar, you know, his belief, and this is a guy who was there at S4, at the S4 facility in Area 51, and he saw things that not everybody else got to see. You know, his belief is that these are beings that have been here for a very long time. The information that we received from Dulce, from my source, states that these are Gigi that were placed there some 25,000 years ago by the Anunnaki.
If you liked this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.